Distancing. Whether it be in a boxing ring, a cage, or on the mat, martial arts requires a complete mastery of distancing, whether it's to set up counter shots in the striking, defending takedowns, setting up your own takedowns, setting up your own strikes, or just in general controlling the fight. Distancing is imperative for martial arts. And today we're going to be diving in to how distancing can be used in counter-striking. Thank you to Abhinav Shakla for the video idea. He's been requesting it for a really long time. I've really enjoyed making this video so far. So today we'll be looking at 3 different strikers: Conor McGregor, Israel Adesanya, and Sean O'Malley. So let's start with Conor McGregor. Conor McGregor is an extremely talented southpaw counterpuncher, and he has a few very unique ways to help set up his counters and just overall control the distance. So what he does a lot is he almost leans forward and to the side of it. He leans to his right, leaving his chin essentially up in the air, begging for an overhand right. Now, he also extends over his hips a little bit. He leans forward. That makes his opponents think that he's closer than he actually is. His head isn't over his hips. His hips are very far back. So that means that if something does come his way, he can lean back, get his stance under him, and then counter. That leaning forward is essentially tricking his opponent to thinking Conor's much closer than he actually is. Then they'll blitz in, Conor will pull back, keeping his stance, and then counter. He's essentially fooling them right in front of their faces. He'll also bait out his opponent to cover distance by pawing at the lead hand. He does this a lot against his opponents. Eddie Alvarez is the absolute best example of Conor's striking technique. This helps him control his own distance, right? Even when he's not looking for counters, it helps push back and it helps neutralize his opponent's jab, limiting the weapons that his opponent can use, making it so that Eddie can only really commit with an overhand right. If he needs to, perfectly lining up Conor's counter. Conor will also stay in that leaned over stance for extended periods of time and almost start pot shotting, right? He'll leave the punch just out of range and he'll almost throw it lazily, right? It's almost like a sloppy jab. When they throw the sloppy jab, they think, okay, I'm not in range to get hit. Then Conor will step forward and crack them. And this is because Conor, again, is giving the illusion that he is out of range, when in reality, he's not. It's the complete opposite. When he's leaning forward, people think he's in range, they try to attack, they fall short. He starts, almost like pot shotting. They think, okay, he's too far away to hit me, and then he blitzes forward and catches them off guard. It works really, really effectively. Now, one thing Conor also does is almost sit back in his stance. He'll keep his shoulders very, very far back, and then he'll explode forward. Keeping his shoulders back, it does sort of the same thing as giving you the illusion that you're out of range, right? His opponent will be relaxed. They'll be thinking, okay, I'm not in range. I can kind of keep doing my own thing. And then he'll kind of blitz forward with shots. He also has a very unique thing against southpaw opponents where he will really start committing to that right side lean. It's more to start baiting out that lead uppercut. Conor loves the lead uppercut, right? The benefit is that lean brings your left shoulder forward, baiting opponents to either lean one way or the other, right? It baits a big defensive reaction. And also mechanically, it loads up your shoulders and your hips to drive a lot of power into that right hand. You saw against Dustin Poirier in the second fight, he was able to start, doing that pot shotting, start leaning all the way to his right, and then jump forward with the lead uppercut, really stunning Poirier really quite well. And these distance tools can be used against shorter opponents, taller opponents, whatever. The whole thing isn't physical, it's more about giving the illusion of where you are and where your opponent is. So that's why against shorter opponents like Eddie Alvarez or even Chad Mendes, these work. And against opponents like Nate Diaz, it will still work. It's all about tricking your opponent, and Conor is incredibly exceptional at that. Again, his fight against Eddie Alvarez is the perfect example of this, just because it has multiple exchanges of very skillful counters in a few different scenarios, rather than a fight like Nate Diaz, where Nate will just kind of eat shots or against Jose Aldo, where there was just one exchange. So I really do recommend watching his fight against Eddie Alvarez if you really want to see that kind of distance control in action, at 110%. Israel Adesanya. At one point, he was the arguably best striker in the UFC with some insane techniques and skills in his prime. Now, similarly to Conor, he does use the sort of lean over to bait in his opponent and then uses that to counter off that. He does this a lot against Kelvin Gastelum, as Gastelum's primarily a boxer who focuses on his left hand. Adesanya would lean his head forward, then lean back and counter quite a lot. The lean forward is very, very effective for Adesanya because Adesanya is naturally a very elusive fighter. He won't sort of walk into range with his chin up. He doesn't seem like an easy target, so whenever his opponents have an opening, they're like, oh, let me get it, because Adesanya is also very long and he controls distance very well throughout the fight. It's very, very difficult, or it was very difficult to hit Adesanya. So eventually when you get given that opening, you take it like a dog to a bone. And because of his range, he's quite a lot better at sort of covering large distances with that. He'll use this with, counter right hands, even starting on combinations. He even uses it to set up spinning elbows, which is really quite impressive. He did this against Gastelum and Duplessis. But he will also bait in blitzes or longer exchanges with his opponent. Now, the interesting thing is he'll, use his feints and, the lean forward to sort of bait his opponents in. But there are times where he doesn't move back. When you move back, obviously you create more distance with your opponent. There are times where he simply stays where he is. Except, because he has such long limbs and really quite flexible hips, he can almost lean back to create the distance for his punch to get power and momentum, while not changing where his feet is and not changing the distance of himself, but his punch, generating large amounts of power and getting some really powerful shots in. Essentially in the pocket. This is, shown against Paulo Costa and Robert Whittaker really, really, really well. There's also, when he's moving back, pouring at the hands, controlling distance, and his opponent's trying to stalk him down, he will step back into the opposite stance. That, again, opens up. It doesn't necessarily change the distance between you and your opponent, but it changes the distance between your strikes. So if I have my right foot, if I'm southpaw, I have my right foot to my opponent's left foot, they're very close, right? I'm really, really close to my opponent. And I step back into the opposite stance and I create more distance for myself because of where my shoulder, my head, my hips are. It very so subtly creates distance, and it's a very good way to disguise the switch stances. Now, Adesanya is also quite notorious for his feints and his fakings. This is primarily to get defensive reads on his opponent, where because of his range, he can safely pick shots around the guard and sort of tailor his weapons to his opponent. And while this is primarily the case, the feints also help disguise little incremental steps to either cover distance forward or backwards, getting in the range that he wants to. He'll start faking with the jab, shoulder faking, kick feinting, ever so slightly cover distance, while his opponent is essentially just trying to figure out what's coming at them before they realize Adesanya is right there in punching range. And it's a really subtle part of his game. It's really difficult to notice, but it's a very, very good benefit of the faking. And Adesanya is a very unique case in the striking because his frame does have a lot to do with how he chooses to manage distance. But there are definitely techniques and skills that you can implement into your game, such as like the shoulder fake, the jab fake, using those to cover distance. Obviously, the head fakes, using hand paws to disguise stepping back into your stance. There's a lot of very interesting things you can do. Alexander Volkanovski is a good example if you're more of a shorter fighter. But there, again, Adesanya, one of the best technical strikers during his prime. His fights against, Paulo Costa, Kelvin Gastelum, Brett Tavares is a good example. He just styles on him. There's lots of great footage you can get on Israel Adesanya to see these techniques in action. Sean O'Malley, arguably the best striker at bantamweight, at least in my opinion. He has some incredible counter-striking skills, and his ability to control distance, not only in the grappling but also the striking, is really just amazing. He uses similar concepts to Israel Adesanya and Conor McGregor, where he'll sort of bait out the lean, get his opponents wanting to come forward, except he'll use the stance, which is a lot more to load up his power. He'll often go like a rear front kick and then step back into the opposite stance, and he'll use that to help give himself more distance before he steps back for counters. Also, if he sees his opponent come forward, he'll step back into the opposite stance and then either pin them with the left hand or a right hand, using a collection of feints, footsteps, just ever so slight movements to confuse his opponent to the point where they're not really sure where they should be, both defensively and offensively. So when they do go, they're usually out of position, and O'Malley is already setting up how he's going to change his feet to set up that counter shot. O'Malley is really one of the best people at sort of overloading your nervous system and getting you very, very uncomfortable. Against Marlon Vera's used to being behind in fights. He had no clue what to do against O'Malley, though. There was rarely any point in that fight where Cheeto could actually get his hands on O'Malley. And even against Yan really struggled to hit him in moments where O'Malley really only got tagged when he decided to sit and trade with Yan. But when O'Malley is on his game and he wants to control distance, he really, really can. And I could absolutely do an entire video on Sean O'Malley's striking skill set. But things to take note from O'Malley's style is, similarly to Adesanya and Conor, is the lean forward, the use of almost like stutter and flutter steps, more jittery movements than someone like Adesanya or Conor, just to sort of get reactions, not necessarily to disguise something as a different attack. It's not a feint or a feint, it's just a movement, right? It gets people reacting. That can be used to cover distance. Confuse can do a lot of things. And also stepping back into counters, stepping back through your stance to set up counters during your counters. Adesanya will disguise his step backs and then pause and then counter. O'Malley will simply do that within the exchange, and it works very, very effectively. Fights you see this kind of skill on display: Thomas Almeida, Marlon Vera, even Aljamain Sterling is a really, really good example. That KO was a perfect example of what I'm talking about. O'Malley is definitely a guy where he has so many different tools to his striking game. Similar to Adesanya, Conor's a bit more one-dimensional, but Adesanya and O'Malley have so many different pieces to their striking game that as a student of the game, you can really kind of pick and choose what sort of suits your style and what benefits you, to also fitting your body type and a bunch of different things, your game planning, how you like to fight. It's really quite incredible, and O'Malley's just one of the best at covering distance like that, using all those tools together. Now, before I end the video, I do want to talk about something very important in the MMA world. Jon Jones has openly expressed that he is pretty much retired, except he is still holding on to the heavyweight championship, wasting Tom Aspinall's career and simply ruining the heavyweight division in the process. If Jon wants to retire, that's completely fine, but please leave the belt behind. Tony has died, a Instagram MMA page and also a YouTuber, has started a petition to strip Jon Jones of the heavyweight title. I will leave a link to that petition down below. It's got about 20,000 signatures at the time of making this video. However, I do want to acknowledge that you are given the option to donate money. None of that money goes to Tony Has Died. All of that money does go to the company change.org. A lot of people have donated money, or some people have donated money thinking that it goes to Tony. It doesn't. He's made this very clear. I'm just trying to help spread that message, but please do go sign that petition. Costs absolutely nothing. At the rate that it's growing, it's very, very impressive. And even though it will likely amount to nothing, the ability for the MMA community to get together behind a cause, I think, is very important. I please recommend you guys go to his Instagram page, go to his YouTube channel, sign that petition, do your part. And anyway, guys, I really enjoyed making this video. Hope you all enjoyed as well, and see you later.